Hello everyone, welcome back to Dr. Novis. Today we're going to be discussing three stories of fame, mystery, and death. Today we're going to be talking about three celebrity deaths that will forever remain a mystery. If you enjoyed the content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Apologies for the hiatus here on Dr. Novis, but between my real jobs as well as my other channel, it's been tough to find time and motivation to research for this channel, but I'm gonna try to do my best to find some kind of upload schedule for Dr. Novis, because I do enjoy making these videos. Our first story begins on June 5th, 1978, in Scottsdale, Arizona. Actress Victoria Ann Barry would enter the apartment of Bob Crane, a famous actor from the time period, most notably known for his acting in the TV sitcom Hogan's Heroes. On this day, though, Barry would not find Crane where she normally would in his apartment. She would find him dead on the ground, apparently bludgeoned to death with a weapon that would never be identified, an electrical cord tied around his neck. Police would rush to the scene shortly after, but you see, this is where our story starts to take a turn. You see, the Scottsdale Police Department at this time in 1978 didn't have a homicide division, and a murder case of this magnitude, remember that this is Bob Crane, a pretty famous actor at the time, was just a little bit out of their depths. The police conducted their investigation. Ultimately, no evidence of forced entry was found. Nothing of value was missing either. The murder weapon wasn't located, so it left police wondering just what the heck happened to Bob Crane. They would find, though, Bob Crane's extensive personal film and tape collection, leading them to one man, John Carpenter. You see, Crane was a bit of a film nut, but maybe not in the way that one might think. Years back, Crane had become friends with one John Carpenter, a regional sales manager for Sony, who helped many famous clients set up their video equipment. At some point throughout his career, it seemed Crane had become infatuated with video equipment, as well as taping his sexual exploits. This is where Carpenter and Crane's friendship would take off, as the two would continue to see each other as friends, even going as far as to record numerous of joint sexual escapades with a variety of women throughout the years. You can see then why the police might be a bit shocked when they find a large collection of tapes at Bob Crane's home, most of them containing different sexual exploits with a variety of women, as well as a reoccurring man. The police would take him in for questioning, as well as taking his rental car in for impounding. There they would search it and find some odd blood smears, blood that would match Crane's blood type. We have to remember, though, at this point, DNA testing was not available, so ultimately the DA would press no charges. See, at this point, it was really only circumstantial evidence at best that would link Carpenter to Crane's death. Years later, in 1990, with DNA testing having taken numerous advancements, this DNA in the Bob Crane case would be retested. This blood test would come back inconclusive, though the detectives did discover in evidence a photo of the rental car's interior, a photo that possibly showed a piece of brain tissue on the back seat of the car. These tissue samples would be lost, though, just one of a number of ineptitudes shown by the Scottsdale Police Department over this entire investigation, though they somehow would manage to put enough evidence together to where in 1992, Carpenter would be arrested and charged with the death of Bob Crane. The trial would rage on, Crane's son even testifying against Carpenter, saying that days before Crane's death, he and Carpenter had broken up their friendship. They had ended their friendship. During the trial, Carpenter's lawyers would dispute this, citing a number of eyewitness testimony saying that the two had remained friendly. As well, Carpenter's lawyers would continue to shift blame, saying that there possibly could have been a number of people with a vendetta against Crane, as remember, he had had a number of sexual escapades throughout the years, leaving any possible number of angry woman or angry boyfriend that could come after Crane. Ultimately, Carpenter would be acquitted. Crane's son, after the trial, would speculate that the only one who had anything to gain from his father's murder was his widow at the time, Miss Olson, as Crane's new will had excluded everyone in the family except for his wife Olson at the time. The Arizona DA, though, was still convinced it was John Carpenter. Ultimately, though, Carpenter would die some 6 years later after being acquitted in 1998. Years later, in 2016, another round of DNA testing would take place, testing once more the blood sample taken from Carpenter's rental car all the way back in 1978. These tests would use up all of the remaining sample that they had left, with sign of some inconclusive results. Two sequences were identified, one from an unknown male and one that was too degraded to identify conclusively at all. Crane's death remains a mystery to this day, and the odd circumstances surrounding it will probably lead it to be forever unknown, as Carpenter, like we said, died a few years after his acquittal in 1998, as well as just the overall ineptitude from the police department at the time in 1978 when Crane's body was found, ultimately probably sealed this case forever closed. As while most of the obvious signs point to Crane's friend Carpenter as the potential murderer, there really was just too many confounding details as well as potential suspects with motive for any real headway to matter. Our next mysterious and tragic death is also a rather famous one, the death of George Reeves, most famously known for playing Superman in the TV series throughout the 50s. You see, on June 16th, 1959, at approximately 2 a.m., George Reeves' body would be found naked with a bullet wound to the head in his room by his friend William Bliss. A small impromptu party had been happening at George Reeves' home that evening. The party would be held by his fiancée at the time, Lenore Lennon. The party was small, only a few in attendance. It said that George Reeves had gone to bed early that night, leaving himself from the party, but at some point around 1:30 a.m., he had descended downstairs, apparently rather upset at the noise that some of his guests were making. Shortly afterwards, his guests would reportedly hear a gunshot taking place from upstairs in his room, and this is where his body was found. Now, this story is a bit odd. Things start becoming a bit more strange once police arrived looking at the evidence. No fingerprints were recovered from the gun. No gunpowder residue was found on Reeves' hand, though at this point in history, I'm not sure how routine gun residue checks were at the time. The bullet which killed Reeves was recovered in the ceiling, and the spent shell case were found under his body. Remember, he was dead laying on the ground. 2 additional bullets were found also embedded in the floor. All the bullets had been fired from the gun found at Reeves' feet, but see, witnesses agreed that they had only ever heard one gunshot. There was no sign of forced entry into the room or any evidence at all suggesting that there had been a second person in the room, a potential gunman. So then what happened to George Reeves? Ultimately, his death would be labeled suicide, as many of those around the actor had said that he oftentimes would find himself in a case of melancholy, as he had found much of his acting career quite a struggle, his only real break coming in the form of Superman, which in many ways typecasted him. You see, Reeves constantly felt like he was in the shadow of his TV Superman appearances. He could never find roles that he felt exceeded this Superman role, and over time felt like he was constantly pigeonholed into this role of Superman. Remember, at this time in the 50s, television acting was seen as kind of on a lesser scale of movie acting or even stage play acting. So then the common belief at the time by some of Reeves' friends and some of the public was that the man was depressed and simply killed himself, his fiancée saying that the jungle of Hollywood was just too much for the man and it swallowed him up. You see, the evidence, though, or possibly the lack thereof, left a lot of people with questions as well. Many of those in Hollywood closest to Reeves felt that there was no way that this man would have committed suicide. Eventually, like we said, though, Reeves' death would be ruled a suicide, primarily based off witness testimony, the physical evidence found, and the eventual autopsy, though there was still that question of the 3 bullets fired as well as the mysterious gun casings. Like we said, many actors and prominent figures in Hollywood at this time felt that there was just no possible way that Reeves' death was a suicide. In the book Hollywood Kryptonite by Sam Kashner and Nancy Schnoberger, hopefully I pronounced that right, they make a case for the involvement of a certain MGM vice president, Eddie Mannix. Now, Eddie Mannix is a bit of a notorious man in Hollywood history. They claim that Reeves had been having an affair with his wife, Toni Mannix, and that it was Eddie Mannix who had George Reeves killed in revenge for this little love tussle. Many believe that Eddie Mannix has ties to the mafia, and there are many notorious stories of this man and some of his dealings throughout his time in Hollywood. Now, all of this is pure speculation, but it did seem that Mr. Mannix was a bit of an odd, sussy fellow who definitely has a history of controversy that followed him throughout Hollywood. Ultimately, though, George Reeves' death remains a mystery, while there are many out there who firmly believe that he did not commit suicide. Ultimately, the official record from the police was that this death would be ruled a suicide. Finally, we come to possibly the most famous and controversial of all mysterious celebrity deaths: the shooting of Tupac Shakur. Who shot Tupac? Who shot Tupac? The ultimate question in all of hip-hop culture, while many feel that they already know the answer to this question, or at least the answer of who might have paid to have Tupac shot. The story begins on the night of September 7th in 1996. You see, Pac at the time was in Vegas attending the Seldom Tyson boxing match with his friend and the leader of Death Row Records, Suge Knight. You see, the story begins after this famous fight in a hotel lobby. It was reported that one of the men in Tupac and Suge Knight's crew reported seeing a certain man that he was familiar with, an alleged Southside Compton Crip named Baby Lane Anderson. The person in Tupac's crew had stated that this man had tried to steal his Death Row record chains weeks earlier. Seeing this man now, the group decide to confront him, which can be seen on the hotel security footage. After this beatdown, Shakur would stop by his hotel room, grabbing something and then heading out with Suge Knight and his bodyguards to his nightclub, Club 662, in a black BMW 7 Series. Shortly after, at 11 p.m. on Vegas Boulevard, a bicycle police officer would stop this BMW for its loud music and a lack of license plate. They would be released without a ticket, though, as the license plate would be procured from the trunk of the BMW. At around 11:15 p.m., at a stoplight, a four-door Cadillac would pull up along the passenger side of this black BMW, the occupants within the Cadillac rolling down the windows, opening fire. Shakur would be struck 4 times, once in the arm, once in the leg, and twice in the chest. He would be rushed to a hospital, but ultimately would succumb from his wounds on September 13th from internal bleeding. Now, this is where our story gets interesting, as ultimately no one would be charged with the murder or attempted murder shooting of Tupac Shakur. You see, this is where things get interesting and a bit complicated. In 2011, a book was released titled Murder Rap: The Untold Story of Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur's Murder Investigation. This book would be released by Detective Greg Kading, one of the detectives who worked in LA on the deaths of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls throughout the 2000s. You see, this book really shook a lot of the modern hip-hop pop culture world, because Kading speculated that the deaths of Biggie and Tupac were somehow inherently linked. Kading speculates that it was P. Diddy Sean Combs who ordered the hit on Tupac. This beef really taking off when Biggie and Diddy released their song Who Shot Ya, which Tupac seemed to believe was making reference to the shooting that had happened to him a few years prior. You see, according to Kading, he believes that Sean Combs, P. Diddy, put out $1 million hit on both Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. You see, Kading claims that P. Diddy Sean Combs had ties with some LA Crips, most specifically Duane Keith, aka Kefe D, and they had hired him to carry out the hit. You see, this is where things would start to get even weirder. Kefe D, the man who, according to Kading, was hired to kill Tupac by P. Diddy, aka Sean Combs, is related to Baby Lane Anderson, the alleged Compton Crip that had gotten into the physical altercation with Tupac and his group in front of the MGM Grand Casino earlier that night. Kading claims that it was Kefe D and Baby Lane Anderson who were the ones in the Cadillac that shot Tupac and Suge Knight. Ultimately, nothing would come of the police investigation into the murder of Tupac, not until July 2nd, 2018, when Kefe D would confess to the public in having a role in the killing of Tupac after he revealed that he had been dying of cancer. He went on to say that he was in the Cadillac that night of the murder and named his nephew, Orlando Anderson, aka Baby Lane, as the shooter, saying that it was in response for getting jumped outside the MGM Grand earlier that night and for that $1 million that P. Diddy had promised. Anderson, though, would die in a gang-relating shooting on May 29th, 1998, so we have no way of confirming this statement at all. As well, Sean Combs very publicly denies any role in the shooting of Tupac. What makes the story even sadder is that Suge Knight, having survived the incident, had allegedly put out a hit on Biggie Smalls in retaliation for the death of his friend, having supposedly paid a man named Poochie 13 grand to kill him. Of course, Poochie, like Anderson, is also dead, so there's no confirming any of these claims unless Sean Combs or Suge Knight speak. We're probably never going to know what happened to Tupac in the following murders of Biggie. And this was it for our 3 celebrities who died of mysterious causes. We'll probably never know any of the true circumstances regarding the deaths of these men, ultimately, tragically, kind of cementing their place in Hollywood history. As always, stay safe out there, guys. It's a spooky world.